Chapter 7 The Mystical Cornfield. Through the power of our intuition, we are connected into an inner knowing. And as the intuition, the more I came to understand this human, I, as the intuitive parrot, knew it would not be right to fly away from him. If I abandoned him, we may never discover the depth of our soul's purpose, and so I assumed the rightful role of his intuition when I disappeared from the form of a parrot to burrow deep into the center of him. Within any human, there are many unique parts, and we could think of them like different animals, aspects, or ideas that can represent the mind, limbs, or eyes. But I was most curious about his heart, which is what kept the story alive. Without the heart, each life would fall apart. And if the mind wishes to create something magnificent, it must rely upon the greatness of the heart. Most people would want to live in a human's head or take control of the body, because we may assume the brain is so smart. But as the intuition, I became charmed when I nestled in the gut, just beneath the beating rhythm of his heart. Deep in the heart center, I would observe and occasionally toss up a feeling to the mind. There was no need to distract or disturb the human's rationality, but rather our curiosity wished to listen to that which was heard from the divine. As Shruti was with us, I knew she was aware of all the thoughts, so it wasn't I who was all-knowing in any matter, but rather the intuition does not rely upon a radio, news station, world alerts, or insight from somewhere outside oneself. If we obey our intuition, we are connected into the principal influencer, which obeys the most loving organ, the heart center. The heart beats in rhythmic resonances, much like a poet's rhymes, and so our intuition listens to the pace of this beat. And through unspoken insight, the intuition can send the brain signs. Still, I wouldn't make any decisions, as I would stay out of the man's way, because all the intuition does is persuade the body and mind to take action. So was I really a parrot, or was I an inner aspect of this man's soul in search of fruition? Beyond keeping awareness upon the heart, I directed our attention to Shruti, for she had been born from the cosmic imagination, and she was the only one that was a step ahead of me. Do you ever wonder if we're trapped in a dream? Or what if life is an illusion? The man spoke the question, while the heart observed without words, and so this rhythmic pulsation was an expression closely tied to the intuition, which was connected to the beginning of creation. There was no way I could send an answer out loud, but still his brain asked for a literal translation. Maybe the brain isn't as smart as we think. Maybe the brain is only brilliant because of the partnership between the human heart and our intuition.
What are you talking about? All life is the work of God,
said Nandi. But even though I'm not bound by chains anymore, why does it feel like suffering is something we can't escape?
There is the part of life called fate. Earth isn't some easy or gentle assignment, but rather, we are here to discover our spiritual connection through divine guidance. Where else in the universe is so much transformation possible? Only on Earth can such evolution occur from the land of the living and dying. And so we are shaped in new ways, while we find ourselves here upon a spiritual exploration,
said Shruti. Wouldn't it be a bit better if the whole earth was a little more gentle?
Nonsense. It's time we take him to the mystical cornfield, said
Shruti. At once the yak rose up and picked up the man when he slung him over his head. As I found myself nestled in the man's core, I realized I could no longer depart or fly off. Ahoy, Nandi! Do you really need to carry me?
No burden is too heavy. That's why God created me to help you. Wherever you go, I go. Remember, we are one, not two. Now I will explain the second aphorism, so direct your attention and listen. The knowledge, which is based upon the notion of I, and this is mine, arises clothed in speech and consists of the perceptions of relative distinctions. It is rooted in the impurity of illusion and is said to be bondage, whose mark is the obscuration of ignorance. This aphorism defines the nature of the light of our soul, which undergoes obscuration,
said the yak. Can you explain more about this obscuration?
And so the third aphorism defines the nature of power that deceives the bound soul in order to explain what causes speech to pervade thought. Know that the mother's womb is the beginning of the universal power which gives birth to all things, since it is through the mother that we are born. The light of our soul enters into the womb of diversity and gives birth to a body of obscuring energy, which gives rise to the limited actions of life, which also can be binding. It is through the body where we express speech, and we can become a victim of knowledge, because from a soul's point of view, it can deprive or limit us of our true spiritual nature. In other words, our sovereign freedom is hidden by the illusion of the idea that I, as an individual, know knowledge, but rather, together what we are is divine wisdom,
said Nandi. But are these energies and the knowledge supported and sustained by this very ground that you and I walk upon? In essence, aren't we born to be separate?
There are two forms of knowledge, that which is superior and inferior, and yet this ground supports all knowledge, wisdom, and power. And this ground which we are supported by is the manifestation of the Great Mother. The inferior and superior forms of knowledge are due to the perception of division, but we are also the manifestation of unity. The power of the Mother sustains and presides over all things, as the Mother manifests both the inner and outer realities. Inferior knowledge directs consciousness out of our soul as a failure to understand the nature of our unity. This obscures our true soul, which exists throughout all of totality. It could be explained that there is a sense of impurity through individuality because it limits awareness of consciousness, even though it gives rise to diversity. To be free, we cannot be bound by our differences, otherwise our actions will bind us, so rather, we must take action on behalf of all mankind and creation. The more we believe ourselves to be different, the more separate we become, and this then obscures the infinite powers of will, knowledge, and wisdom, which is the true action of our universal consciousness. What I'm trying to say is that although we appear as separate beings, I come to carry you because I know we are one,
said Nandi. Can you help me understand why we appear different if we are actually one consciousness?
The fifth aphorism explains that in order to put an end to the knowledge which obscures and divides consciousness, we must manifest one's own essential nature. The soul is our conscious nature, which is full, pure, and perfect in all respects. When we work with spiritual exertion, expansion, and the upsurge, we are deepening into our true state of being, and so we must not abandon our own essential nature. This state of oneness is said to be unity with the universe, and so, in the ancient East, they know this as Shiva, who is also called Bhairava. Bhairava abides in the brilliant radiance of this universal vibration, and so it is the essence that enters the Mother of Creation. The all-pervasive Lord of Consciousness is said to be God. God is that great omniscient dimension which sustains universal consciousness and plays the game of creation, sustaining, and even destruction to emerge as different forms, because the consciousness wishes to perceive and experience its own undivided light of awareness. So although the world has many religions to help us, they are all directing us back to this creation, which is the force of the entire universe,
said Nandi. What did you mean about an upsurge?
The upsurge of consciousness is the sudden emergence of the highest level of intuition, which is the outpouring of consciousness, consisting in the ever-extending awareness. Since we are filled by the universe and born from it, we are living in unity, even if we forget this. This could be thought of as a state of spiritual amnesia, because we are actually the entire universe manifest. We can try to remember this with active effort and a single-pointed awareness, but speech and ideas can also limit us, hence why there is an aspect of knowledge that is bondage. Words can barely help us grasp our own true nature through our personal effort, because it seems to direct us to a separate I consciousness. But we can be carried along by the innate exertion of our own nature, which can be identified with the supreme intuition of freedom, which is connected to the universal consciousness. This flux of energy is God, or Bhairava, and contains within itself all the powers of the universe. It can expand in an instant, carrying a flash of the highest level of consciousness. When we notice this, we are awakened and absorbed into a higher state of contemplation, beyond the mind, words, or even the imagination. In this way, we can reach supreme knowledge, which is the wisdom of the divine. And these divine revelations of Shruti could also be called that which is heard,
said Nandi. And where are we going? Where is the mystical cornfield, and what about a mystical stone? How does this relate to anything we've just discussed with these aphorisms?
Before you see what's become of humanity, we need to visit the divine stone in the mystical cornfield so that the fullness of these teachings can be embodied. You helped me find my eyes, which allowed me to seek out a body. But as we use words to describe these teachings, we call them smriti. But as you hear the transmission for yourself, we call it shruti,
she said. But if you know what we are here to do, and where we're meant to go, why do we need to journey to a cornfield if there's nothing you don't know? Shruti was so kind when she wrapped her hand into mine.
If we're not careful, knowledge leads to bondage. Because sometimes the smartest people in the world are the ones who cause the most harm and gigantic problems. The world has expanded the mind into gigantic proportions, but why have we forgotten the power of our heart? Even if our world's ignorance is unintentional, we must understand that there is something beyond words and knowledge that is most important. We are called to meet the spirit rock because it is a link to the great beings who gather in the mystical cornfield. Such a stone is like a link for direct experience, as it is a portal to a higher world. Only those who remain quiet in the mystical cornfield have touched such grace. The community who is led to the stone has discovered the power to cut their lower nature off, and so they gather in meditative silence because they've learned that the truth is deathless,
said Shruti. So who is the community in the cornfield?
I call them the teachers of humanity. And although only some of them live in physical bodies, the mystical cornfield is an interdimensional gateway which leads the soul home through fruition to unite with all our ancestors, both past and present mystical beings,
said Shruti. Are they liberated beings? Now the winds began to change. It felt as if the air knew what she was going to say. Hundreds of birds rose up together and flew as if they were one being, when over the next hill we saw the stalks of the corn swaying.
We've made it. This is the place,
said Shruti. The closer we got, the more silent we became. There I found people seated in silence around this mystical cornfield who I knew were spiritual beings. Some of them lived in human bodies that had cut off their demon heads, while they rested in contemplative meditation. As the wind would blow, with a gentle touch, the stalks of corn would wave. Nandi carried us through the cornfield, but still, not a single person looked our way. Afraid to make a sound, some people meditated with their eyes closed, while others were absorbed with their eyes open. "What are they doing?" I whispered.
They're opening to everything,
said Shruti. How do you open to everything? I wondered.
Let go of the battle. Breathe quietly and let it be. Let your body relax and soften your heart. Open to whatever you experience because you can trust that it is happening,
said Shruti. Her voice was gentle and soft, but the awareness of the cornfield seemed to be listening as well. What type of spirit came to dwell here?
Shush! It is I who imparted everyone,
said the cornfield. The mystical voice came from everywhere at once, but no centered source of this expression could be found. Had anyone else heard this wisdom? But no one moved, as all these beings sat in silence upon the earth ground. From the point of view of the intuition, I was most concerned with the vibrational aura and presence, because from the intuitive awareness, this place could have been heaven on earth. Only after a few more steps did I become aware how all these people received divine guidance beyond which words could express. And they were open to this because they had found a still meditative posture after they'd severed off their demon heads. What the hell happened here? Is this the remains of a massacre? There are severed heads everywhere.
The harder we fall, the higher we bounce. The sacred cornfield is the gathering place for those who prepare for fruition. This is a common sight where the demon head is cut off. Only those who are divinely guided are ready and willing to evolve, said
Shruti. Nandi lowered himself onto his elbows, then rested on his belly as he sat on his hind legs. While I stepped off the brave yak, Nandi bowed to a central stone in reverence. But to whom did he bow? And where was the spirit of the mystical being? It was only a cornfield, but within the wind, there was a source of wisdom to which everyone was tuned in. After another moment of silence, the wind swept through the corn. One stalk of vegetation leaned over to my shoulder and then whispered in my ear.
Have you ever seen a wild horse? Ever try to mount a wild one that has never been ridden before? Such an idea is an analogy for the wild mind that most people ignore. Within our human nature, the mind can be a great tool, or it can turn into a wild beast. But this cornfield is where the cycle comes to cease. Do not call this a massacre, for this is not a demonic annihilation. Those who discover this mystical cornfield are prepared for liberation, which we know as fruition. Now, if we realize our mind is like a wild animal, we can't just strap a saddle on and begin to ride, but rather, we could inquire into the self to see what we find about what's happening on our inside. Since the mind is akin to a wild animal, we could follow our mind space and observe the results of our past actions. We could wonder about the future, or get lost in the imagination. But if we wish to tame the mind, we've got to get a good idea of what the mind is doing. Lucky for you, your mind appears to be on the body of a trusted yak. It has taken you on a great adventure. But as for the rest of the world, we cannot force others to tame their mind. Not everyone will discover the profound stillness their soul is looking for, but rather, the world has become like a production facility that continues to produce minds of a demonic horde. In order to serve this planet, we must start with our individual body, heart, and mind. Through the process of meditative self-inquiry, we can tame the wild animal, the yak, or whatever animal we wish to ride. As the mind becomes aligned, we will ride upon it to the pathway of fruition. And this is a symbolic cycle out of earthly suffering. This could start through the process of self-inquiry, but this is only a single form of contemplation. To begin, you could ask yourself some questions, like who am I? Or notice how your mind tries to answer everything with knowledge. What if you sit like everyone in the cornfield to observe in silence?
Said the essence of the hidden mystical being. There in the center of the cornfield was a giant spiritual rock, but even my intuition knew that a rigid stone couldn't talk. Whoever this voice came from appeared to speak to everyone, yet I realized that depending on where we were upon our journey, such a voice could mysteriously deliver all of us our own individual wisdom. Then I thought of all those who had yet to find this cornfield, because so many people train their minds and bodies not to follow the soul, but rather they are caught in the bondage of lesser knowledge, as they rely on patterns of their mental operations. So for those who have found this place, we are aware of the source of divine spiritual wisdom. But still, it seems that this is only the beginning of the ending, where we find spiritual liberation that Shruti calls fruition.
This is our starting point, but such a community is near to the end of the soulful evolutionary process. If we imagine the analogy of production, the beings who sit in meditation are closest to finding fruition. On the opposite side of the spectrum, many people chase material desires and sense gratification, but in time, these will not last, as they are subject to dissolve within creation. It is wise for the soul to consider something deeper, and this is the portal where the soul opens. Welcome back, my child. Welcome home into the entrance of creation,
said the mystical being. But I thought the purpose of life was some sort of power or enlightenment.
What we are seeking is what we already are, and as long as you search for something else other than your own self, you will lose track of what you already are. So again, we must ask, who is it that we are?
Said the mystical voice. Who am I? I know I am more than the mind listening to these words. So am I the body who lives in this existence? Why, of course not. My soul is in union with the universe, and what I am is a spirit that appears to be covered.
We approach fruition to discover what has long been covered. At our core, we are all one, and so it is this bliss, this love, this truth, which is our pure nature,
said the mystical voice. What once appeared as a headless massacre was actually the process of discovering our true nature, which had long been covered. And just when I wasn't suspecting it, the mind could get so still for a moment when there would arise the great silence. With my gaze upon the divine rock, time slipped by. Why, in the mystical cornfield, we see how a divine space is a real place, and this is the nourishment where our truest self is most aligned.
The sixth aphorism explains that the body of consciousness, which is the light of one's own true nature, never changes, even as the universe expands and contracts. The sixth aphorism helps us understand that one's own state of being also remains unaltered when the powers of consciousness are withdrawn back into it. And so, the sixth aphorism states, when the wheel of energies fuse together, the universe is withdrawn. Such energies comprise the entire universe, and the nature comes forth through knowledge and action. These energy expressions are said to form a circle, or a chakra, because they illuminate all knowledge and action. Its fusion is its assimilation into one's own nature, propagated by the involution of consciousness due to its withdrawal, where a merger takes place into the soulful nature. The Supreme Soul, which is the vibration of the universe, can discover how it is the light of God, and the driving causes that produces the expansion of knowledge, which consists of words and meanings and the rest,
said Nandi. My dear friend, These words are nothing I understand.
Exactly. Do not let this limited expression become bondage. When the pure vibration of consciousness arises, we may call it such a word as God, or Bhairava, or the great omniscient dimension. But the point is that there is a way to feel how the entire universe is an expression of unity between yourself and the divine creative force of Shruti. Some even call her divine energy Shakti. And when the mind is united with her intensive awareness, your presence in the world is not separate from the ultimate consciousness. The Sixth Sutra expresses that there is a way to reflect the power, knowledge, and action of the entire universe. When this occurs, we are not separated from the awareness of the ultimate consciousness, and so, even when our soulful nature is covered by a body, the pure essence of the soul's consciousness is never obscured, even though it can appear in a state of withdrawal,
said Nandi. Such an idea is felt and is not limited by words depicting knowledge. And so I went on to contemplate the power of my own consciousness, which is an expression of the cycles of energy that creates, maintains, and destroys the universes.
And so in this cornfield, we come to the last stage, which is called fruition,
said Shruti. But still, I have so many questions.
It is in asking questions where we could inquire about who it is that answers. Or even better, we could recognize that however deep our questions go, there is always more wisdom we can uncover. In that sense, what you are is limitless. And this is a state of union with the entire universe. Such was the revelation of Christ's consciousness. He and his Father were united. What we are called for is to merge with that which is ever present. Can you tune into that which is heard in this moment? When that happens, you discover yourself as a wise master. That's the real you. That is the one who knows all the answers. So then, consciousness is composed within all things, and in life, we enter into a state of contraction due to the differences generated by our separate bodies. But still, we can discover how our consciousness expands through a process like meditation, prayer, or inquiring into the self,
said Shruti.
So tell us, who are we really?
Whispered the spirit rock in the center of the mystical cornfield. That rock spoke as if it had a spirit, but I was not certain if it talked to me. Are we the universe contained in souls, connected back home to infinity?
Such is the nature of immortality,
said the serpent named Kundalini. There was no other response to the question. It seemed we were all one, and we were one united teacher that taught in silence, just like the great rock. The longer I sat, I realized it is up to you and I to observe all of this. We are not given instructions. Seated in the cornfield like the rest of them, I wondered if we'd been tethered into an unseen world. The intuition called our body upright, why I felt called to touch it, and so my hands felt the smooth surface as I bowed to the spirit rock. What felt like a year could have been a minute, and as I rose up, I spun around in awe of all things. The trees, the wind, and the cornfield spoke freely. Then when I looked again, there was not another soul here. It was only me. Then beside the giant rock, there was that thin wooden box with a handle upon it. This was Shruti. It was her, Shruti. When I took hold of the box and sat with my back against the large stone, as I unbuckled both latches before our finger pumped air to produce a great hum. The steady rhythm poured out when the instrumental vibration appeared through the wooden lung, which sung. Shruti's eyes opened wide when wisdom came too. As she explained,
It's all one. We are everything. Your thoughts are not private. But still the question remains. Will you stay in the illusion? or will you pass through fruition?
Was this I who spoke it? But was I also her? There is a way to resonate our very being in supreme harmony, and it seems that within the world there are portals to the infinite within our earth. Of course, this cornfield was on earth, but through the right frequency, our minds could travel above and below. So was this cornfield something I imagined, or was it a real place which led us to the deeper levels of our soul?
Concealment is what happens through life, but grace is what connects us back home. Life and death is our spiritual evolution, and like fruit, we may think of this as a ripening. The body won't last, but the vibration is here and now. In this sacred space is the resonance that does away with fear, where we can unite with that great omniscient dimension so many know as God. Let us rediscover what we are meant for. May we open up our soul. Between us and the universe, there are layers which may appear different, but in truth, together we are one, as we have always been whole,
said Shruti. It seems only a journey can bring us back home, and in time, the resonance of Shruti's box began to slow. Our fingers were so gentle upon the last breath, for the instrument had come alive to die, and then the hum ended when we were in awe of silence. This quiet wisdom spoke without a word, but still all was heard. Here Shruti's hum manifested as the pulsation of our eternal creation. Her tone was everywhere and in everything, as she could transcend the worlds, bodies, and form within the living. Even without a single sentence, she encompassed all divine wisdom.
Let's go. You're up.
Said Shruti. Up for what?
Fruition,
Said Shruti.
I know where we must go if we wish to assist in the soulful production. Let me lead you to a secret cave where my ancestors meditated underground, and this will lead us into the Naga Nation. I'll lead the way as we go to the most ancient civilization, which predates the human population,
said the serpent named Kundalini. Seated upon the back of the yak, I was no longer my past, but rather in this moment, I was a brand new person. I saw how I was a spiritual being, and even though we are all still human, together we are the soul of universal creation.
can you feel it? The land under our feet is pregnant as our mother approaches a new birth. Many growing pains affect the world and appear as destruction and devastation. But right under our feet, there is so much to be unearthed. And what will happen when we descend and dig deeper? Oh, what will we find? Maybe we'll get to the bottom of it all. Maybe we'll discover why the soul is bound by time,
said Shruti.